Thank you for tuning in to this anniversary series episode of Movie Geeks United. In this episode, we celebrate the 35th anniversary of Terms of Endearment, the James L. Brooks family comedy drama and Oscar darling that starred Deborah Winger, Shirley MacLaine, and Jack Nicholson. This episode features a wonderful and wide-ranging interview with another of the film's co-stars, Jeff Daniels, and it was conducted in 2009 by host Aaron Aradillas.
I was kind of earmarked to go into my family's lumber business, and being the oldest son, and it's a kind of generational kind of business. And I was in a small town, and this drama teacher, choir teacher, decided to do musicals. And when you do musicals, you usually need guys. And in a small town, there weren't enough guys who could sing and also play sports. And so she was really trying to round up just anybody who could be in this case, South Pacific. And she needed sailors. So she knew me from the choir class. So she kind of grabbed me after a basketball practice and threw me on stage. And it really was just something that I was naturally good at. I knew what to do to hold and entertain people, 600 people in an auditorium, and whether it was playing the lead in a musical or a bit part, it just kind of came naturally. So I just kept doing it.
And when you went to school and left school to go to New York to pursue this, were you a prodigal son, or was it a blessing, a family blessing?
They knew all through high school that there was something going on. There was something that, I stood out, and the parents were told in particular, you need to watch this one. There's something going on. And I just kept getting better and better, and this teacher kept throwing bigger and bigger parts, at me. And then I went to college, and after a bit of trying to bang my way into it, or, get in the door, I got in, and I started to win a couple of awards, and then I met a guy who had a repertory. It was kind of at another college. I auditioned for this kind of 16-member troupe. We were going to do 4 plays in the spring of 1976, and one of the directors was from New York, it turns out, and it turned out to be Marshall W. Mason, who was at the time the artistic director of Circle Repertory Company in New York.
Wow.
And a huge break. One I just kind of fell into. I just went and auditioned hoping to get some experience. Well, I got the lead in one of his plays that he was directing, Summer and Smoke. And he said, before we even did our first performance, he said, well, you know what you should do with your life, don't you? And I was like, well, he goes, you should come to New York. You should join Circle Rep as an apprentice. No promises, but I can help you get your foot in the door in New York. And so I did that.
And so tell me, so what was that like, that late 70s New York theater experience?
It certainly was more vibrant, it seemed. This was the off-Broadway scene, so it was, Broadway was foreign to me. People like Kevin Kline were doing Pirates of Penzance and things like that. We were off-Broadway. We were downtown, and everything was new plays. Joe Papp was doing it. Certainly Second Stage was kicking in at that time. Circle Rep and many others, were doing. Sam Shepard was still around. Lanford hadn't won the Pulitzer yet. And it really was, for an actor to come from college and academics and, that kind of, here's another play from Dramatist Play Service, and it was directed by Marshall Mason, who's standing right here. That was pretty heady stuff. So now you go to New York, and there's Lanford Wilson sitting in a chair trying to figure out the second act of his new play. And there's John Bishop, and there's Corinne Jacker, and Albert Inarado, and on and on, Barilla Kerr. It was just these living, breathing playwrights. And that, for me, as it turned out, years and years later, as I created my own theater company in Michigan and turned myself into a playwright, I was always interested in the writers. And so to be able to meet a Lanford Wilson, at 21 years old was, I never forget. I never forget the first time I saw him. It's Lanford Wilson, the guy who wrote Hot O Baltimore, sitting right there,
Right.
having trouble figuring out his next play. That fascinated me.
And so, at what point, or was it almost from the beginning that, yes, you're doing theater, and that's sort of your first love, or that's the introduction to acting, but also going on, I guess, auditions for TV and film? Because if I know your credits correctly, your first appearance, I believe, is on a Hawaii Five-0 episode.
I think so. There were some commercials before that where I was at least in front of the camera, but that's probably right. Hawaii Five-0, 1979.
So was that viewed as, okay, as just supplementing the theater, or were you interested in, like, getting a show or getting a movie?
I always had my eye on film, and I saw, when I was at Central Michigan University, before I even did the big audition where I met Marshall,
Mm-hmm.
I saw Dog Day Afternoon, and it came out, I'm going to guess, 75, 76.
Yeah, around there.
And I just loved Pacino in that, loved him, and loved Casals, and loved what, I went to it maybe half a dozen times, skipped classes and went to see that until I thought I could see the script. See the script and see the choices. I wanted to see what Pacino's choices were, because I realized after seeing it so many times, it was just, there was a script, and he had it in his hand, and he had to, just like me, figure out how to do it. And this is what he came up with. And so after I saw that, I said, whatever it is he's doing, I want to go figure out how to do that. And that meant I had to go to New York. And so I went to New York and joined Circle. And they taught me that. What was beautiful about Circle was that because you were off Broadway, there was no presentational aspect to the performance. We were playing to 150 people, which is kind of like playing in a medium close-up.
Mm-hmm.
The audience is so there that they can see you thinking. You don't have to send it out because you're in a 1,000-seat house. And so there was no transition to film. So inevitably, Circle rep, they can't employ you all the time. And even if they did, you can barely make a living. So I knew Marshall came to me one summer. He said, we've really got nothing for you next year. I mean, this would be a time to, go.
And
I said, and I was like, great, because they'd been so great to me and so helpful, and I'd learned so much, and I'd worked so much, easily a dozen shows or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, yeah, okay. And so I turned the agents loose and just started auditioning, and that's when I got Ragtime and then Terms of Endearment after that.
Well, before we get to Terms, I guess it must have also been encouraging, Dog Day Afternoon and Pacino, to know that he also was a theater person first and would go back and forth between the two.
Yeah, and that seemed to be where the good actors went. Again, this is a 21-year-old kid coming out of the Midwest. I didn't, my connection with Marshall was New York, so that drove the decision. But once there, and when you read all those Samuel French and Dramatist Play Services plays, and you see Robert Duvall, and you see Dustin Hoffman's name, and Pacino as young actors starting out, you're going, well, okay, that's where the really good actors went, was New York. So that's where I need to go if I'm going to be considered a good actor. So that's what I did. And then subsequently, having done all the films, when you do a show 8 times a week and you make it look like it's happening for the first time 8 times a week for month after month after month, that's a great school, great training for doing 20 takes on a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And so that you can tell instantly the theater actors, the people, the actors who've had theater, because they can make it look like it's happening for the first time on number 19.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who haven't had theater, they're cooked after 3 or 4.
Right.
Cooked. Now they're doing things different, and they can't repeat it, and they can't,
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a great place to go for me, knowing I wanted to also do film.
And so Ragtime is your first big credit. You play, I believe, the character P.C. O'Donnell.
Yeah.
And so what is that like? I mean, you get this part in Ragtime, and it's Milos Forman, and it's this big epic and so forth. What was that as a training? I'm assuming some kind of training in that, okay, this is film, and so this is different in theater, but it's also something I do want to do.
Well, it's you're there. You're instantly thrown into a you're thrown into the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And, I didn't have a leading role. I didn't have what Howard Rollins had to deal with. Howard had a leading role in that thing, and Mandy Patinkin and guys like that. So I was able to come in for my week or two and observe, and maybe I had one line, or maybe I just stood there while Cagney talked, but I was there all day.
So what was that like, standing there and watching Cagney talk?
Well, I watched his screen test.
Yeah.
Because Cagney didn't think he could do the role. He was, I'm going to say, 81 at the time, maybe.
Yeah.
He basically stopped working, didn't want to work, and Milos Forman really pursued him for the part of the commissioner. And so he wanted a screen test. Cagney wanted a screen test. And so they rented out one of the studios at Channel 13 here in New York. And I'll never forget it. They had Kenny McMillan come in, and half a dozen of us who were, policemen, and for a scene between Kenny and the commissioner. And it was 4 pages long, and, we're just in the room as background. And so we're in there, and Cagney comes in on 2 canes with someone helping him. And he sits in the chair. Couldn't have been nicer, but he was definitely 81. And he couldn't remember the lines. And it just, we were in there 2 hours, and Milos cut the scene from 4 pages to 3 pages, to 2 pages, to 1 page, to 4 lines. And he finally, Kenny McMillan would say his line, and then Cagney would look at him and look down at the script and try to find it, and then come back up. And eventually he was able to get the 1 page and kind of relax a little bit. And you could see, at the time, this is 1979, 1980, black and white monitors, and you could see the close-up, and you could see Cagney's face. And that's when I saw it. You could see him become Jimmy Cagney.
Mm-hmm.
And even at 81, you could see it happen. And, well, I'm going to tell you. And he would come point at Kenny McMillan, and you could see it, and Milos saw it. And, it's editing.
Mm-hmm.
And you could cut back and forth, and Milos knew that he could edit a performance out of Cagney. Mm-hmm. And eventually got even more than that. But Cagney realized he could still do it. Milos knew he could do it, and Milos said, "You're going to be fabulous. You're going to be wonderful, wonderful, wonderful." And that was it. The only other time I've seen that was with Clint,
right,
doing Blood Work. I've see Clint's the nicest, easiest, most generous guy in the world. And then when they put the camera on him and he goes, "All right, go ahead," you could see him. It's like air goes into him. He just lifts up, and it's Clint Eastwood.
right.
And then when he's done, it goes away. Beautiful to watch.
And so Ragtime comes out. And so from Ragtime, how did you get the role of Flap?
I'd been going up on a lot of films by that point, and had gotten close on a few. And then was just one of, the regular 4 or 5 really good actors that would usually funnel down into the final callbacks for a certain film. And Jim Brooks had me come in, and maybe there were, 200-300 guys he'd seen, both coasts. And he told me later, he said, "You were the only guy that convinced me that you had read all those books that Flap was supposed to have read." I don't know how you walk in with that, I certainly didn't, but that's what Jim saw. So months went by, because the movie went into turnaround, no one wanted to do it, and they had Shirley, but nobody else, and then they got Deborah, but Deborah had casting approval. So then Deborah came into New York with Jim, and we read through all the scenes. And that seemed to go okay, but again, you don't hear.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally you read in Liz Smith that they're going to do Terms of Endearment after the first of the year, and you're waiting for, am I in it? Am I in it? And you finally get the call, and yes, you are.
And so what is it about that, what do you think it is about that character? I just saw the film the other night, actually, by happenstance. It's been playing on HBO. And I'd seen it a bunch of times as a kid, and then I hadn't seen it for a while, so I saw it again. And even as a kid, I remember when I saw it, your character, the character of Flap, for what he does in the film, he's never one who you never grow to dislike him. He manages to always, even when he messes up, you always feel bad for him, and you feel even to a point you kind of wish Shirley MacLaine's Aurora would give him a break now and then, and that's I find that very tricky to do, and I don't think every actor could have done it. I think that's what makes that character special.
Well, it starts with McMurtry's book and the writing there, and followed up by the great writing of Jim Brooks. I mean, it was just so well written and so well defined. That said, it's not this kind of movie creation.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing false about the character. The character is so human.
Mm-hmm.
The flaws are there, and I think we cringe at Flap because, I mean, yeah, there's some extremes to, have your wife have cancer and then you're having this affair. John Edwards. So, he's so human. He's so accessible to us. We know him, or we are him, or we, this kind of pompous kind of thing, and yet behind that is this kind of insecurity and fear. I mean, there's nothing false about it. We know this guy. We've seen this guy. We've met this guy.
Mm-hmm.
We are this guy. And so I think, and the fact that he's trying to, and he feels horrible, and he feels the guilt, and he admits, I don't know how I'm going to do the kids. I don't know how to, I mean, how many, every parent has at one time are going, oh, what the hell am I doing with these kids? Where's the instruction board? So I think it's just very accessible, and in that way it's kind of all the uglier, in a way. That's what actors do. I mean, I've always kind of chosen characters, or they've chosen me in this case, but I've always liked that, about truly showing the good and the bad of a character, and maybe that becomes more, it's not like you create an image and play to that, and then at the end of the movie you have to have the big speech where you're likable again. I've never, believed in that.
Your scenes, you really only have two types of scenes to a certain extent, and those are scenes with Deborah Winger and scenes with Shirley MacLaine. What is the different temperaments of those two types of scenes that you have to do throughout the film?
Well, lines are lines, and acting's acting, and real is real, honesty is honesty. It's all kind of the same thing. Deborah, certainly, you never see where the character starts, but when they say action, she's already there, and where Shirley is kind of more of the school of there's a character to be, put on or to dive into. Both were equally, real by the end of the day, but just the approach was different,
And what about being directed by a first-timer, writer-director?
Well, I didn't know it at the time, but having done it so many times since, it's for me it's preferable because on a movie you get to have the writer on the set, which is a luxury usually, and to have the guy who wrote it and now is directing it, there's no confusion about what the writer intended. The director is not going to misrepresent or misinterpret, that's for sure, or try to put his own spin on it that really doesn't serve the story. So, Jim was just wonderful. What I don't remember what he did or didn't know about camera, but that's why you have DPs. You kind of explain the look you want or what you're trying to do with it, and that's the DP's job. So I really liked it. He was so wonderful. The choices, and it seems to be the writers too. The choices that he ultimately wanted me to do were things I never would have thought of. And I think it's not always you don't always have to be a writer to do that as a director, but that was my experience with Jim. It's just he was so. The choice he wanted me to make was so unique and wonderful, and you just kind of, as an actor, just end up executing it.
And so when you saw the film put together, in kind of whether the rough cut or the finished product of it. Did you know when you saw it, like, because here's your first really major role? Did you know when you saw it that this is really going to connect, or are you the type of person where, you can't see the work that you're in because you're looking at your performance?
No, and I was too young. I mean, you don't know. I was so thrilled to be included, and that I wasn't cut out of the movie, and all of those, reactions.
Right.
The fact that it was received as well as it was received, was a huge, huge bonus.
Deborah Winger is Emma Greenway Horton.
I got some good news. I'm officially pregnant. If you're not happy for me, I'm going to get so mad if you're not happy.
Shirley MacLaine is Aurora Greenway, her mother.
Why should I? Why should I be happy about being a grandmother?
Jack Nicholson is former astronaut Garrett Breedlove.
Wind in the hair, legs in the center. I am not enjoying this.
And they are all coming to terms.
What is it, Mama? You are not special enough to overcome a bad marriage. Listen to her. She's going crazy.
Emma, your mother boycotted your wedding. She hates your husband, and she only holds you in medium esteem.
So it comes out around the holiday season of '83, and it becomes this big hit with momentum. What was that like for you? Because you'd been in theaters, for the last few years, but I'm sure there was this. I'm sure you started getting, your flap on the street. Did you start getting that?
Yeah, a little bit. That was the start of all that. Yeah, but it was still. I still. It's different than a play. You open a play, and if you're lucky enough that it's a hit, instantly you can feel it in the audience.
Right.
You open a movie that's a hit, maybe you can walk by the movie theater and see the marquee or see you on one of 4 movies that day being shown, but you don't feel it. There's nothing physical. There's no connection really. So you just keep you're told that you're a hit.
Right.
But where it happens is 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, you get a call to go meet Woody Allen on Purple Rose. And so, I mean, just how oblivious I was and how fast things started to move for me was the movie came out, and I mean, maybe it was even 10 days. I want to say it was 10 days because it was like the end of the first week of December that I got the call, and I went to meet Woody to go into Purple Rose of Cairo, and I had to screen test. And I tested for him, and then, it seemed to go well. And then I was, getting rid of the safari hat and putting my clothes to go back to the city, and, who knows. And Woody came over, and he said, so, what have you done? And I blanked. I didn't even mention Terms of Endearment.
Right.
I looked at Woody Allen and said, well, I was in a Hawaii 5-0. And he looks at me, and I kind of nods and then walks. I said, Woody, and he turns back. I said, thank you. As in, I'll never see him again. And this was wonderful, and I can say I met Woody Allen.
Right.
In the thank you. And then he leaves, and then 2 days later, we get a call, you got it. And
considering you had a major role in Purple Rose, 2 major roles, really.
Yeah. Imagine getting handed that script. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm curious, because, we all hear the story that you only get the pages that you're in, but I'm curious, did you actually get the full script?
Yeah, I got the full script because I was, except for maybe one scene, I was in every scene. So, yeah, but I also got the edict, if you don't say a word about the script. I didn't.
Right. Now, you play a Depression-era actor, and then, so there's that acting, and then you're playing a character within the film, because Mia Farrow's character loves going to the movies. So you kind of, I guess it was kind of fun. I mean, you're playing 2 different acting styles, because you're playing a 30s acting style, which is, I guess, more theatrical and outgoing in their Broadway Baxter kind of role. So
it was pretty self-explanatory. I mean, you'd read it and you kind of go, oh, okay, I get it. You know, the actor from Hollywood is, you know, that insecure star, so that's fun to send that up. The character who was on screen who came off was a little trickier, but then you just play 2 or 3 colors, or, you know, you just simplify, because those characters, at least this one in this particular kind of mediocre movie from the 30s, there wasn't much to him, so when he comes off the screen, there's not much to him. These 2 or 3 things, and it's the other guy that's you know, the completely insecure, you know, fool.
Right. Well, as we start wrapping this up, I have a list of some of your credits here, and I just want to go through some of these, and I'll just throw out a title, and whether an anecdote or an impression, you know, you can share related to that film. So I'll start with, I guess, the film after Purple Rose of Cairo, which is one of my all-time favorite films, and that's Something Wild.
Yeah, that was a joy to do, because it was Jonathan Demme, and he makes it so much. You so want to go to work every day, and everybody was making the same movie, and you know, there was no such thing as a bad idea with Jonathan. You know, you could try anything, and he really encouraged you to really kind of, you know, stretch and you know, be outrageous and, you know, all that stuff. I mean, all that stuff that sometimes it's wonderful and you can use it, and when it isn't, you toss it. But it really, I mean, Jonathan's the kind of guy, you could have $100,000 to make the movie or $100 million, and he'd have the same enthusiasm, you know, at the start of every day.
Well, I got to ask about 2 scenes in Something Wild. I guess they're just so endearing and so funny. One is late in the film, the prom sequence, the class reunion sequence, and that is your dance sequence. Your first on-film dance sequence.
Yeah.
Choreographed or just kind of improvised on the spot?
Completely improvised, and what it was there was this really good dancer right next to me.
Right.
And, you know, this black guy that really had the moves and could moonwalk. And Jonathan wanted me to moonwalk a little bit, so I had this guy show me some moonwalk. But then everything else, I just kind of, you know, we just rolled. And I said, Jonathan, I think I'm just going to, you know, kind of steal from this guy on camera. And he goes, great idea. So that's what we did. And then I, you know, would burst into the moonwalk and, you know, do the white man's version, you know. But basically it was all kind of happened on camera.
And the other, I guess, key scene, I got to ask, your first big, I guess, sex scene with Melanie Griffith, and it's an extended scene, and it's actually a very funny scene, and it goes from erotic to discomfort to humor to back to erotic again. So what was that scene like? Because it's not a normal movie sex scene that is obligatory, that you feel is usually sex scenes are kind of obligatory in movies, but here this is actually there's actually character details in this scene.
Well, it's that same thing. It's the straight guy who gets in trouble, and it's accessible. You know, the audience, they're kind of led into it, and you know, we're allowed into that, and so we're there with him, and taken along with him, and all of that. And that's the kind of the great part of this particular character, is that he, you know, that everyman thing, and sometimes everyman characters, certainly in this case, grab the audience as he goes into a particular scene, and I think that's the case.
And finally, on Something Wild, what's it like? I mean, because the film has its own rhythm for 2/3, and then Ray Liotta comes in, and kind of just he disrupts the rhythm, but in the best way possible. But when Liotta came on the scene, what was? I'm sure did that energize the everyone to the next level? Because I mean, it is such a whirlwind performance that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, and that's part of in a way that we're a setup for when Ray comes in and completely, you know, turns everything over, and here's this happy-go-lucky straight man, you know, every man who now is in this very dangerous situation that Ray played beautifully. And again, we're dragged into that, and I think that's the accessibility of the character again, dragging us into the world of Ray Liotta.
Well, in the next title, and I feel it's an underrated film. I remember I saw quite a bit when I was younger. House on Carroll Street.
Yeah, I love the period movie. I love the FBI thing about it. Peter Yates.
And Mandy Patinkin.
And Mandy, yeah, and Kelly. And it was, you got to wear a hat. Yeah, well, I like that one. Yeah. I like those kind of period kind of things,
Yeah. And so then I guess we could say your first quote-unquote action thriller, Arachnophobia.
Yeah, that was the movie. I had done a lot of films. I kind of got out of the gate real good, real quickly, and real strong, and immediately started doing my off-Broadway thing, where I started taking some independent films. Checking Out and Grand Tour and a couple others, and the star,
right,
no longer shown. So Arachnophobia was me going to the agents going, I need to be in a movie that somebody actually sees. And so they found this thing that Frank Marshall was going to direct, and he had pretty much only produced up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, great, sounds great. And, the first-class operation, Amblin Entertainment, and Frank Marshall and Kathy Kennedy, and it really was just, you're working with the A-team when it comes to production value. And so that was, I enjoyed that one, It was, and it was strange because I think they kind of didn't think much of it at the time that we were doing it. And then they tested it up in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was like a roller coaster ride. People went out of their minds.
Mm-hmm.
And so a movie that the studio kind of said, well, it's going to tank, but it's for Frank, and so he'll do something good for us next time. And then it tested great. And they immediately then said, okay, well, great, it's going to make $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
And then because it was spiders, there are some people that just will not go see a movie about spiders.
Right.
Just can't drag them. So I think it came in at about 65, 70 million and was deemed a failure by the studio. It's like, well, wait a minute. You didn't think it was going to make a buck when you first got your hands on it, but no, well, Hollywood.
I can envision the crib all around me, clear as day. I can still feel the feeling of waking up, just drowsy, peaceful, secure, and then there it was.
Probably just a daddy long leg.
Yeah, well, it seemed huge, and it just came relentlessly, just crawling through the bars of the crib, and then as it touched my bare leg...
I know, you were just wearing a diaper.
All of my limbs involuntarily froze, just froze.
You'll probably still have to sleep is all.
I was paralyzed, Molly. I still get paralyzed, okay? Just please try to understand how this makes me feel. I was just physically unable to stop it from crawling along my naked skin. I can still feel its hairy little legs, just then up to my face. It's just a feeling of utter helplessness, being explored by an alien thing, that's all.
Well, I guess the postscript is when you see a spider in your house, do you kill it or are you compassionate?
Only if it's as big as my hand do I kill it. And that's how big the one in the basement at the end of the movie was. As big as my hand. The thing was huge.
Gettysburg, which is an interesting film because Ted Turner kind of made for television, if I remember correctly, originally, but then it goes theatrical instead first.
Yeah, it was a miniseries. That's what we were shooting. We were shooting, I want to say 2 hour, kind of a 4-hour miniseries. Just kind of 2 nights, big event, TNT kind of thing. So it's shot for the square box for television, and for me, the role was I loved the role, and dove right into the research and learned a lot about the Civil War and became fascinated by it. And, Chamberlain is one of these great unsung American heroes that prior to the movie coming out, many people had no idea who he was or what he did, how important the Battle of Gettysburg was to the war.
Mm-hmm.
So that was all wonderful. It was a great experience. And then, they decided to make a 4-hour movie out of it instead. And, well.
What was it? I mean, you've given, I'm sure, in theater and so forth, you've given quote unquote speeches or monologues, but in a film where you're in the military uniform and you got to give the big night before speech.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be an actor's, one of those rare things that only a few actors can say, I have one of those speeches.
Yeah, and it really is. I worked on that for about 6 weeks before we shot it, and what made it interesting, and it meant a lot to me when we premiered the movie, is that he was a great orator. Chamberlain was, and I just made the choice to talk to them, and the soft sell on it, but just to kind of really. And when we did the premiere, Sam Elliott sat right behind me, and after that speech played, he just squeezed my shoulder, and then he told me later, and I just loved him for it. He goes, 9 out of 10 actors would have climbed the ladder. They would have started low and built and built and built, and come on, follow me to Gettysburg, and off we go. And he goes, you did the one thing that every other actor is scared to do.
Right.
And Ron Maxwell had something to do with that, about how he wanted it done. But and it really seemed to carry a lot more power and seemed to work better. So I was very happy about that.
I've been talking with Private Buckland. He's told me about your problem. There's nothing I can do today. We're moving out in a few minutes. We'll be moving all day. I've been ordered to take you men with me. I'm told that that if you don't come, I can shoot you. Well, I won't do that. Maybe somebody else will, but I won't. So, that's that. Here's the situation. The whole Reb Army is up that road a ways waiting for us, so this is no time for an argument like this, I tell you. We could surely use you fellas. We're now well below half strength. Whether you fight or not, that's up to you. Whether you come along is well, you're coming. You know who we are, what we're doing here, but if you're going to fight alongside us, there's a few things I want you to know. This regiment was formed last summer in Maine. There were 1,000 of us then. There are less than 300 of us now.
Well, then 1994, what was the year of 1994? Let's just, I guess, it's a year in your life, because you have Speed in the summer and then Dumb and Dumber at Christmas time. So what was that year like?
Again, sort of removed. Again, you're not, Speed came out and I was just in it. And it became this huge hit, which kind of surprised us. But we were shooting, we had just finished shooting Dumb and Dumber. And so I was so wrapped up in that, and really taking Dumb and Dumber, trying to kind of keep the career going, because it was kind of fizzling, and Speed, I'm in it, but I get killed on page 80, and originally in the Speed script I got killed in the elevator shaft, like on page 20, and I said, the career's in trouble, but it's not in that much trouble. And they said, well, there's a rewrite coming, you last longer. I'm going, oh, okay, well, let me see that. And then when that came, it was like, yeah, okay, great. So I did Speed. But then you do Dumb and Dumber, because I just wanted to change it up. I wanted to do a comedy. Nobody really knew I could do the comedy. 2 out of 3 of my agents said, do not do this movie with Jim Carrey. He's going to eat you up. And I said, 1, he's a nice guy. 2, there are plenty of scenes where Jim's not in. 3, I think, my guy's the follower, Jim's the leader, so I think it's going to be fine. I'll put my comedy chops in what they're asking me to do in this movie. Unless they cut me out of the movie, I'm going to be fine, and I'm going to hold up my side of the screen. Let me take a chance. So then when the movie came out, and it was number 1 for like 6 weeks in a row, that's where I felt it, because that movie changed things for me as far as fame went, because now I would go through any airport and they would, instead of them looking at me going, what's your name?
Right.
Because of Dumb and Dumber, they looked and they said, Jeff Daniels. That one movie did that.
No,
what was great about it was that it truly was funny, despite the massive critical reaction to get this movie off of screens immediately. There was something innocent about these two guys and their stupidity that still people watch it today. And, it makes people laugh today. So mission accomplished, so to speak.
It is a modern classic, and I gotta assume that I'm guessing that film, and then to a certain extent Fly Away Home, that opened you up. I guess that opened you up to kids recognizing you. Is that?
Yeah, well, I had kids of my own by that point, and that's one of the reasons I took 101 Dalmatians. Fly Away Home, I just thought was a great family film. I loved the character, and Carol Ballard is a great filmmaker, and it just was. I just liked that story and that script, that whole creative spirit that Bill Lishman had. That was one of those things that I identified with, and that kind of the guy that's kind of outside the loop, and I liked that, and so that was one of the reasons I took that, because of Winn-Dixie.
Right.
If you're going to do a family movie, make it so that it's actually interesting and not so broad-based and broad colors and all that. So. I really like Fly Away Home's one of my favorites. Shot beautifully, Caleb Deschanel and Carol. We would get to magic hour at 5:15 in the afternoon, and we had like 15 minutes, and they would go, all right, grab that plane, just start running up the hill, and Carol would grab a camera and Caleb would grab a camera, just DPs, just shooting great shots.
Well, speaking of great visuals, and I guess this might be your most special effects heavy film. Pleasantville.
Yeah.
What was that like? And also the late great J.T. Walsh's final film.
Yeah, it was fun to sit around the trailers with J.T. and William Macy and veteran actors talking acting. I remember that about it. I enjoyed that, and J.T. was the stories. I remember doing this picture, and he would tell a story. It was a survivor, I mean, a lot of us, Macy and all those guys we've been doing it for decades. I mean, it's less about being proud about a certain film or how much money you're making or this or that award. It's about, we're still here. We're still doing it. We're spending our life doing it. Like Marshall Mason said, what you should do with your life, don't you? And to be able to still be doing it is wonderful. Pleasantville was just, Gary Ross handed me the script and said, see if you like the character of Mr. Johnson, and I said, well, yeah, I just identify with that. Art, and the guy discovers art and the beauty of art. And,
right.
I said, yeah, I would love to be involved.
Cheaters, which I must say is one of my favorite TV films of the last decade. It was on HBO, and actually, when I saw it on HBO, I said, I thought it should have gotten a theatrical run. At the very least, I thought it would have played in art houses and done something maybe on the level of like what Election had done in theaters.
Yeah, it's a good comparison. John Rockwell, I think his name is, actor and now director, directed it, and just a good story. Another flawed hero, very flawed hero, very human, very. What would you do?
Right.
I mean, that's kind of the. Yeah, would you have done what he did? And he chose to do that, and if you had any kind of doubt or question whether you would or not, let's follow him because he did. And so I really liked that kind of where it again, a character that grabs the audience and pulls you on screen with it.
Well, and I'm kind of curious on the daunting task when you did the remake of The Goodbye Girl, because you're dealing with Neil Simon, great man of the theater, but then you're also dealing with a iconic performance in movies, which is Richard Dreyfuss' character. So what was that like?
Well, I've never been one to shy from a challenge, and it is iconic. But I kind of said, well, let's see, Olivier played Hamlet, but many have played him after it, played the role after it, and I thought, well, maybe there's room for a different interpretation. I don't know. It was worth a try. I had never worked with Neil before either, and
Wow.
it was probably my chance to work with Neil Simon.
Mm-hmm.
So those were the two reasons, you know.
Good night and good luck. Which I gotta feel that film experience. It also must have felt like also, I guess, a theater experience.
Well, Clooney, being an actor, he knows how to run a set. He knows what actors want, and he gives actors room. He hires really good people to do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me of Clint.
Mm-hmm.
It was a man set, you know, in that, yeah, you're really good. I hired you. Do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do you think it is? Let's just do it. Let's go. And George is really into improv and kind of, you know, just keep it loose and let's, you know, do the lines, but, you know, loosen it up. And so it was great, man, to have that kind of respect. Woody gave it. Woody Allen was the same way. Clint's the same way.
Mm-hmm.
It's Robert Altman's the same way. It's you want to deliver for that director even more than the guy who's got his hands all over you and basically saying, I want you to do what I'm telling you to do. And it's like, well, okay. Should have hired somebody else. You know, we'll just do what you want.
Well, and The Lookout, and I bring up The Lookout because it's an underrated film, and your performance in it, once again, kind of obviously similar in a way, some of the other roles you've done, whether it be in Speed or whatever, as the best friend, if you will. But it's such a beautifully layered performance as you play, you play a blind character. And I'm very intimate with blind people, and this is one of the best portrayals of blindness. And people joke when I make this observation that there's actually a scene of you eating, and usually you don't see blind characters eating in films because it's messy or too tricky or so forth. I mean, you'll see blind characters drinking but never eating, and that was a great detail in this film. I was wondering, what was the prep? What did you do to prep for that character? Because it's, like I said, it's a wonderful portrayal.
It doesn't take much with me. I've found a little goes a long way. In that, I went to. I'm from Michigan, so I went to the Michigan Commission for the Blind, which is located in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I just spent a day with them.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the Braille teacher showed me Braille and really had me working on Braille and so I could feel it. And, you know, I just steal unmercifully. You know, I had a wonderful woman, Melanie, I think her name was, who walked down the hallway like she was marching with her stick out and, you know, how you tap, 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 tap. And so you become her, you know, you imitate that kind of confidence, and you can see the wall coming, and she knows it's there, and then she pivots and turns, you know. Counting steps. She goes, I know it's 19 steps to the curb. And, you know, all that stuff. You start to just take mental notes. And then I ate lunch with them and watch them eat and watch them interact and watch, you know, and you know, the choice of whether to do a kind of a, you know, a floating eyes kind of thing or not, you know, that was discussed, and I kind of went with it, and I think they were worried about it. They did a screen test, and they said, don't do that. And Walter Parks is one of the producers, and he showed the screen test to Spielberg, and Spielberg said, are you guys nuts? Do the floating eyes thing, because it's very, I don't know, there were guys in Kalamazoo who did that, you know. But it was, you know, I mean, you know. I mean, being intimate with it. They want to be independent. They don't want, you know, the ones like Lewis didn't want anyone to think that they couldn't do absolutely everything for themselves. Thank you very much. And so that's kind of what he did. He had a wonderful sense of humor about it. 1-800-Flowers, you know. Yeah, it's a beautiful bouquet. I love it. I look at it every day, kind of stuff, you know.
And I got to ask you about, you know, you talked earlier about Speed, about getting killed off in the 20-page, but then the rewrite came to last a little longer. But I got to ask about Traitor, because you have one of the best from last year, one of the best oh shit moments in Traitor.
Oh, do I? I haven't seen it. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that where the car and I'm getting beat up and Don and I are pretending we're and then I run down this thing, they gun me down,
Right.
3 scenes in a body bag. Yeah, that's what I told Cheadle when I showed up. You know, it was good to. I'd met Don years before on something else, and so here's some Cheadle doing a movie, and it's got Guy Pearce. Oh, good people, and I liked the script, and you know, I showed up, and they go, "We're so glad you're doing this. This role is such a great role." I said, "Yeah, it's 3 scenes in a body bag, but yeah, I agree."
Well, do check it out because it is a great moment.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those. Oh, Speed has an oh shit moment, and then the house blows up. Yeah.
Right.
Which is, I must say, the Speed moment was Roy Scheider. I read a Roy Scheider interview about Jaws, where he was looking over the side of the boat, and the camera's looking up at him, and he sees the shark. And they said, "Roy, my God, what a moment when you saw the shark. How did you do it?" He goes, "Simple. I had my face, I tightened the muscles in my face a little bit, and when I looked and saw the shark, I let the muscles go." And he, you know, just a complete actor trick. And that's basically what I did in Speed. And I've had, you know, people in Speed go, "Oh, my God, that moment when you saw, oh, my God, how'd you do it?" Well, Roy Scheider told me. You know.
And finally, I guess a movie that's coming up, State of Play.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's that like? And I guess the question is, who do you share your scenes with, and how do you think that film's going to turn out?
I have no idea. It was great people involved. Kevin, the director, I really liked him, and he met me when I was in New York doing a play, and you know, just one of those. It's like good night and good luck. You want to be involved with it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I have a couple scenes with Ben and a couple scenes, one scene in particular with Russell. You know, which are 2 great reasons to do it.
Right. And going back full circle to the theater, obviously you split your time between your Purple Rose Theater Company in Michigan, Chelsea, Michigan. Is that correct? Is where and that's so you split your time between that, and you write plays for that and so forth. And then, but right now you're in New York rehearsing. And I read the name of the play, but it's skipping me now. But is this the Carnage? I believe it's
God of Carnage.
God of Carnage.
Written by Yasmina Riza, and she wrote Art, Lifetimes 3.
Wow.
And they did this play in London. They did it in Paris, and then they did it in London. And I think it's wonderful. It's very funny. It's 2 couples, 2 sets of parents, and we each have an 11-year-old boy. And our 2 boys got in a fight on the playground, and our son took a stick and hit their son and knocked out 2 teeth. So the parents are sitting in the living room of their living room in this case, and we're kind of discussing the boys' actions and making sure that this doesn't happen again. And of course, it, you know, as a parent myself, that just can't end well. Because someone says something about your son, and then you say something about theirs, and then it just becomes this. And Yasmina has written this wonderfully, I think the marketing for it is right on, a comedy of manners without the manners. Everything is civilized, and everything is polite, and underneath it is chaos and truth and how you really feel, and how we really are in society. Are we ever really this civilized and this, you know, peace, love, and understanding, or is there this primal kind of, you know, dog eat dog under everything? And so I think she addresses that in this kind of strange setting, this kind of simple, again, accessible setting that ends up just blowing up in front of the audience's face.
And if I understand the casting, I guess your counterpoint is James Gandolfini, and your better half is Hope Davis.
Hope Davis and myself, and then the other couple is Marcia Gay Harden and James Gandolfini.
And so are rehearsals going well?
They are going well. We're actually having great difficulty keeping a straight face, which I think is a good sign. It's wonderful, and that she's written this. It's not, at times it's absolutely hilarious, and then it spins into this kind of Albee, Beckett, Pinter kind of ugliness. Pausing like Pinter and these kind of awkward kind of moments of painful silence. and then someone saying something just horrific to someone else, and then back and forth, and this kind of really dissection of life in our society. It's really wonderful in the midst of all this hilarity. There's just some outrageous things that go on in it that, well, one in particular I haven't seen on a stage. I know that, so we'll see.
Well, that sounds. When does it open?
We preview the end of this month. We open, I believe, March 22nd.
That sounds really exciting. I hope maybe if I'm in New York I get to see it. It sounds terrific. Well, Mr. Daniels, I want to thank you for taking this time out to talk about, obviously, Terms of Endearment. We'll talk about many other things. It's terrific stuff. Next time, do you have anything else you want to come back and talk about, whether it's theater or something, another film you're really passionate about? Please, you have an open invitation to come back. I do want to continue this conversation.
I appreciate it, Aaron. Thank you very much.
Happy birthday coming up.
Yeah, another one. Okay.